Well, good morning, everyone. This is Billy Trout, Manager of Taxpayer Education for the Tennessee Department of Revenue. And on behalf of our Commissioner, David Geragino, and our staff in Taxpayer Services and our Audit Division, we want to thank you for your attendance today for our presentation about books and records and statutes of limitation. So we're certainly glad to have you with us. We have a large number that are currently still signing in, so we'll go through a few details here with you and some logistics as we begin the presentation. And certainly a very important subject, especially this time of year after the holidays. People sort of get that business hat on and start thinking about taxes, federal and state and otherwise. So it's probably a good time for us to all kind of evaluate what this looks like for our businesses and our clients as well. So just want to introduce a couple of folks here to you real quickly. First of all, we have our special guest this month is Thomas Meisenzahl from our audit division. He is a tax auditor supervisor in our development unit there. So Thomas, welcome and thank you for joining us. We have one of our assistant directors in taxpayer services, Dan Vinson, online monitoring your chat, and Katie Julian, who's our fabulous presenter again for this month. We'll go through logistics, and she and Thomas are going to kind of walk through this material and talk through this, and I'll pop in every once in a while and also be helping Dan out on the electronic side. So with that, I will go ahead and mute off and turn this over to Katie. So Katie, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Billy. Excited to have you with us today, Thomas. Just a few things before we get rolling here. I suspect we've got a very large group joining us today, which is kind of rare for the week between Christmas and New Year's, and I suspect it's probably a lot of CPAs that are maybe needing CPE credit. So with that, I'll say this again at the end, but when you exit the webinar, when it's over, there's a short survey, just asking for feedback, but also if you need CPE credit, that's where you will request CPE credit, and you have to also answer the question with how you want your name listed on your CPE certificate. So Billy mentioned chat. We have it closed down right now while Thomas and I work through just some basics here, a few slides for you, that part of the presentation. When that's over, we will open up the chat and then take questions through the chat and answer your questions. So if you would like to follow along with a PDF, I don't know if we've put it in the chat yet or not, but you can scan this QR code right here, and that will take you directly over to a PDF of today's presentation. I'll give you just a minute to do that in case you want to follow along, because as you may have noticed, these links, if you try to click on it directly from this WebEx screen, it's not a link. You have to actually do it from the PDF, and we do share links. So we'll also share this again towards the end, our contact information. Likely we won't get around to all your questions, but we are always happy to take your questions and have a great support team at Revenue. Revenue.support@tn.gov is a way you can email questions, or you can call our general tax line at 615-253-0600. So with that, as Billy said, today's tax webinar is about books, records, and statute of limitations. We are very fortunate to have a subject matter from our audit division with us today. Thomas is going to be sharing some kind of practical tips and stories about things he's seen when he's auditing, things that will really help you as a CPA or as a business owner understand some of the implications of the importance of your record keeping and what you need to maintain and for how long and all of that. So thanks for being here, Thomas.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, we'll go ahead and get started here. Here's a brief overview. Obviously, accurate record keeping is not just good business practice, but it's essential for tax compliance and can make a big difference when you're preparing for an audit. And here's the thing, Thomas, I know you can attest to this. You never know when you're going to get audited, and you don't want to be behind the 8 ball. If you do get a letter in the mail that your business is being audited, you want to make sure you've got all your ducks in the row before that, so it doesn't come down to having to gather that up later. So we're going to kind of cover all aspects of that. We're going to be talking about bookkeeping best practices, really important about maintaining exemption certificates, various aspects relating to the statute of limitations. What is an informal conference in that process? What does that look like? We're going to be sharing resources, and then, like I said, after we go through some basics here, we'll open up the chat. So hold your questions for now, and we will answer as many of those as we can get to a little bit later on here. So, all right, the first slide here that we're going to be talking about is required records, best practices for bookkeeping. Some of these are quite obvious. Sales invoices, your purchase records, general ledger and chart of accounts, bank statements, financial statements, your cash receipts and disbursement journals, other tax returns, other state tax returns, and your federal tax returns. Like I said, exemption certificates, we're going to go a little bit further into that. And I thought this one was, this last bullet on here, Thomas, is really interesting. Can you talk about maintaining records for if theft does occur? Also, I think breakage and stuff like that. Explain a little bit more about that, Thomas, if you could.
Yeah, so when you are under audit, you are liable to hold all records for 3 years plus the current for state taxes, but federal is about 6 years, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But the biggest thing that we note is when we go out to an audit, if someone's like, well, I don't have the records or different things like that, especially not just in records, but in inventory, we see it a lot with liquor. But if you have a theft of liquor or a theft of anything, we, strongly encourage you to get a police report. You can use a police report, insurance documents, different things like that. As you know, we've had a ton of natural disasters in Tennessee, everything from floods to tornadoes. So trying to keep record of all that is very important to help kind of justify it. Because remember, you're collecting, at least sales tax, you're collecting it on behalf of the state, and you got to be able to show the burden of proof. So those are key documents to make sure that you keep in line. Another big thing is we kind of gave you like a general list here, but whatever you use to file your tax returns, regardless of any state tax type, make sure that you keep your supporting records for that so we basically can recreate how you did it.
Perfect. Right. So basically, you're wanting your purchase records and your invoices to line up with your inventory plus what you've sold, and if it doesn't, you might want to be able to explain why, right? So
yeah, and I'm not saying you need to keep, sales records for, sales tax. You don't have to keep, daily. You can keep monthlies, but just make sure you're able to support the documentation to the returns.
Perfect. All right. So on that, just kind of carrying forward a little bit with the organization and accessibility, maintaining records in a clear, organized format. So no shoe boxes, Thomas, I'm assuming would be best. We
I
can
mean, you can. There's nothing legally that says you
right.
have to do it, but like we were talking about earlier, if you have electronic records, and I'm going to read this verbatim, but if a taxpayer keeps electronic records, it must provide them to the department in the standard record format upon request. The department will use the best information available if the taxpayer does not maintain appropriate records. So if you have them electronically, you have to be able to give them electronically. You can't just print them off. Now, I know some businesses, mom and pops especially, I've seen everything from a shoebox of receipts to a business that used a spiral bound notebook before. So as long as you can, like I said, as long as you can show how you got to your tax return, it can be any kind of documents or any way.
And I would assume the more organized it is, the smoother the process. So if you're under audit, you want that process to go smooth.
Oh yeah, the more that you make us work, or not work, but the more that you make us guess. We have different procedures, auditing procedures that are out there, and other additional records that we can get a hold of to do things. But if you can keep, the best records you can, your dailies and your monthlies, and show how you get into that, and then show how you get into your annuals, that makes it so much easier. So
For sure.
gets us out of your hair a whole lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, we love our audit division, but we don't want to see you, and if we have to see you, we don't want it to be for very long, right? If we're a business or a CPA out there.
No.
No offense, of course. So preparing for that audit, Thomas, so obviously you mentioned this before, you keep the records for the current year plus 3 years. And the second bullet here says maintain records longer if under audit or appeal. So could you explain a little bit more about what that entails?
Yeah, so civil statute limitations are 3 years plus the current. So 3 years prior and plus the current year that we're working on. And that's based on when the return is due. So if it's due sales tax, I say sales tax because that's what we look at a bunch. It's the next month on the 20th day you have to file. So it's when the return is due, but maintaining records long enough after the audit or an appeals audit, or if you take it to court, if you decide to appeal your audit and take it to court, which you have the right to, that can be a very long process. So making sure you have those records, and especially a big thing is if you request a refund, just because you think you get a refund, and we process those pretty quick within 45 days, but we still have to look at a bunch of records to verify that you get a refund. So we're not just talking about audits that you could look at, that come from us, but those are refund audits. We also have to look at records as well.
Right, our whole refund unit is within our audit division, and they're looking back and making sure they have a checklist before a refund is actually approved, right?
Yeah, big thing right now is, and we talked about this before we got on, is Schedule G with our franchise tax, making sure that you keep the appropriate records to verify that, because technically Schedule G is still under audit, even though it has been appealed, and we're going back. So when you are audited, we are double checking those refunds. And even if you didn't file for those refunds and you qualify for that, we are giving credit for it on some of the cases. Yes.
And I was just going to mention here real quickly too. I think all this information is fantastic from a state perspective. But Thomas mentioned earlier too, that there are some other rules that the IRS uses for federal purposes that may be a little bit different. It may require certain other types of record keeping that we're not going to be addressing today. Things like, things that affect basis and things of that nature that you need to keep for business assets and depreciation and other types of deductions on the federal level. So just realize that we're discussing state requirements today, just in case you happen to be kind of mixing that up. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great point, Billy. But also to add to it, we see this a lot in franchise tax where you get to have a carryover period for your credit for 15 to 25 years, depending on what the credit is. And we look at all that to make sure it's a valid credit. So making sure that you have ample documentation to provide for that.
Right. For sure. All right. Well, we're going to kind of move on from bookkeeping best practices here and talk for a minute about exemption certificates. If you are a retailer, especially in this state, you no doubt probably have some of your customers give you certificates saying, hey, I don't owe sales tax, whether that be their resale certificate, or maybe they're based on the type of business that they are, they don't have to pay sales tax, like a nonprofit, or they're buying agricultural products or products used in the ag business. Other things, government exemptions, there's all kinds of exemptions. It is very important that you have on file a certificate, whatever the exemption that they're saying that they have, that you have that exemption certificate. We're going to show you here in a minute how you can verify that, but also save a copy of it. Some exemption certificates do expire, and you're going to want to make sure, if you have customers that are just kind of using what you have on file to be able to make purchases on the regular, that you go through those certificates periodically and make sure that they are in date. Like a resale certificate doesn't have an expiration date on it. That resale certificate is good as long as that business is in business, right, or at that location. But other certificates do expire every so many years. Nonprofit exemptions do, ag certificates do. So you want to make sure that the exemption certificates that you're keeping, that you're retaining, for your customers are in date. But you do want to also retain those expired certificates for audit purposes. Anything else you want to add to exemption certificates? I'm going to show them how on the next slide, Thomas, how to check to make sure one's valid. But
I mean, this is probably one of the biggest issues that we run into in audit is exemption certificates. Some keynotes, like you've already said, Katie. The only thing I would add is if you deal with industrial machinery or manufacturers, those certificates are on an annual basis. So please, make sure that they have one each year because they may qualify, they may not qualify every year, depending on what they do for their business. Now, you are protected under the Goodwill Act that you are not held responsible as long as they provide you with a certificate that's in date and valid that you can check, then you're not responsible for the tax as long as they provide it. But make sure that you keep that certificate as long as you can. We do give leniency if you forget a couple, you can contact them. The other big thing with certificates that people don't understand is and realize, especially with 501c3 nonprofits, are the payment type. Yes, you can accept any payment type, but when it comes to accepting payment of checks or credit cards, it must match the name on the certificate. So if you have one for a school or a church, you need to make sure that that the check or the credit card is issued through the school. Now, I understand that you have authorized users or principals on that account that have their names on those, but those should be the ones that are signing off on the exemption certificate to match. So that's probably the other biggest thing I would just add to that.
I'm glad you mentioned that we always like to stress that with anytime we're talking about exemption certificates.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that just a little bit too, if you don't mind, and mention about governmental exemptions for sales tax. The sales tax exemption for state governments, local governments, and the federal government, there's a generic certificate that's available on our website. So that's not one that's actually issued from the Department of Revenue. So if you're a retailer out there that's accepting this, make sure that you are, like we're talking about here, getting funds that are from legitimate government sources, government credit cards, government purchase orders, things of that nature. Make sure this lines up, as it relates to that. So that if the exemption is questioned, then you know that this is coming from an actual governmental entity as opposed to a person that might be representing themselves as the government, but they're using it for their own personal use. And nonprofits, of course, uh, very, very important to do that too. Agricultural exemptions, just real quick on that. We get a lot of activity in our registration unit for people who set up, let's say, an LLC to run their farming operation. They'll get their certificate in their actual name as opposed to their LLC's name. Make sure when you register that you're registering properly and that your checks or whatever you're paying with are going to match up, just like Thomas said. It's really important. We can work with you. We can get you re-registered and get you the right certificate, but it's a lot of paperwork involved. So just want to make sure to get that right up front. Thank you, everybody.
I just heard on the news in the last day or two that they may be getting rid of checks. Wouldn't that be crazy, y'all?
Hey, they've already got rid of pennies.
I know. Checks are next. As I was mentioning, we do have a way on our website to verify any exemption certificate. If, gosh, y'all, we see some examples of some kind of weird stuff that people try to say is an exemption certificate. But regardless, you can verify certificates through TinTap if you are a retailer, dealer that is, you're questioning what one of your customers has given you. You can go to TinTap Home and click on exemptions and then verify certificate. There is a drop down to choose which type, and you type in the number and just make sure that it's a valid certificate, and you can always reach out to us as well to check on that. All right, we're going to talk about statute of limitations. We're first with regards to statute of limitation, we're going to discuss assessments. Department of Revenue does enforce specific timeframes within which it may assess taxes owed by taxpayers. And again, we're looking at, we can assess taxes within 3 years from December 31st of the year that the return was filed. So what about some exceptions to that? There's no time limit if there was no return filed. If that return, if we've got a missing return from however far back, that is subject or not, is outside of the statute of limitations or an exception to. Also, if a return was fraudulent, there's no time limit. There's an extended period of 2 years for IRS redeterminations affecting state taxes. And for purposes of the statute of limitations, we consider extension payments, which is part of our franchise and excise tax, to have been made as of the statutory due date or extended due date of the return. Now, that's a lot of information we just gave between these last 2 slides. Anything you want to add to that, Thomas?
No, I think you hit it all right.
All right.
Just remember 3 years plus the current,
Right.
unless you make amendments, but that's all.
From when it was filed.
Yep, when it was
When it
filed.
was filed,
So
not when it was
now-
due.
Yeah, now with your refunds, you need to be careful with refunds.
Here we go. Yeah.
Which we go. I'm gonna let you cover that, and then we can add to it.
Well, yeah, not going to say much more than just what you see in front of you, y'all. That's basically, again, we're looking at that 3 years from December 31st of the year in which the payment was made that you can request a refund. If a taxpayer makes business tax payments and fails to claim the payments on the return, it will lose the right to claim those payments after 3 years from December 31st of the year in which it was that return was filed. So.
Yep. So just remember it for refunds. It's when the payment was due, not when the return was due, or when the payment was made.
Okay.
Excuse me. And then audit limitations are 3 years plus the current for when the return was due, not necessarily when you got around to making the payment or came up with payments. So just remember, and we'll get into this in a minute, there are penalties attached to all this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little advertisement as well. When you're filing a claim for refund, make sure you do it on the 10-tap system. So when you sign in with your username and password and you go to the particular account for which you're requesting a refund, you click on the additional actions link and you'll find a link labeled claim a refund. And you'll want to click that link, put the information in, and attach any supporting documents that you might have that help you explain what's happened. And that way we can process your refund claim much quicker, okay? There is a paper form on our website along with a form called Report of Debts, DBTS, debts, and those are required. So doing all this electronically speeds up that process, okay? Super important to get it right. And also that unit stays very busy. So I would like to say that you should not expect a refund super quick in most cases because of the fact that they have a high volume, but they do work them as quickly and as efficiently as they can. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And for more questions about that, last month's webinar was on refunds and penalty waivers, and that the video, the recording of that webinar is out on our website and our webinar video library for more information about refunds and penalty waivers and specifically how to apply for those.
And we try to keep them done within 45 business days, but that can be tricky sometimes depending on how far back we go.
Certain times a year too, maybe.
That too. Available records.
So some practical tips here for compliance. Accounting software sure does help if there's if that software has audit trail features. Scheduling regular internal reviews is also a great idea. Training your staff, make sure everyone is aware of the documentation standards, aware of everything we've been going over, such as in this webinar today. And of course, consulting, should you choose to, with tax professionals for complex exemptions or complex situations. All right, we're going to switch gears here and talk about a process we have called an internal conference. Any taxpayer who has received a NOPA, a Notice of Proposed Assessment from us, can request an informal conference. At that conference, which most are actually now, we're able to offer those, virtual through Microsoft Teams. Used to be all in person, but you can the taxpayer can explain to a hearing officer why he or she thinks that assessment is incorrect. But there are many caveats here. The next slide is going to go into why you may not need an informal conference, but there's a cool link here. If you've got the PDF of this presentation, you can click on it. It's kind of like a wizard. It walks you through whether you need an informal conference or not. Again, we'll touch on some of that in the next slide, but definitely a good tool there to go through. You must make a conference request in writing. Excuse me. Sorry to cough in the microphone. Within 30 days from the date of that NOPA, and then we will contact you within 10 days of the request to arrange a time and date for the conference. So why you might not need a conference, number one is if that NOPA isn't just an estimated assessment. In other words, you did not file a return. Like the first thing that little wizard walks you through, the link on the previous slide is going to ask you, hey, was the return filed? If it was not, got it. That's the first step is to file the return. If it's just an estimated. Most of our probably tax professionals that are joining us today understand what that means, but for businesses, this is often misunderstood. When you get a letter from us that says it's a notice of proposed assessment, and there's going to be an amount on there, that is not necessarily an amount of tax due. You've got to read a little bit deeper into that letter, and it'll let you know, hey, this is just, it might possibly say, hey, this is just an estimate that we're putting out there. You haven't filed yet. You need to go file so you'll know what you really owe. Now, sometimes that NOPA might be, if you have already filed, it could be an amount that your return was deficient, the payment was deficient, or other reasons. So informal conference is not going to be needed if that NOPA is just an estimate. We're going to say, hey, go file the return and see. At that point, if you still have a problem with what you owe, that's different. But informal conference not needed if you filed a return but did not pay all the tax reported as due on the return. That's for those deficient payments. If you didn't pay everything you owed, it's not needed there if you need to just make an additional payment. Also not needed if you close the business but you've not yet closed the tax account, or was assessed only a penalty and no additional tax due. If it's just a penalty, the process there is to apply for petition for a penalty waiver. You want to talk to us a little more about your experience with informal conferences,
Yeah,
Thomas?
so these are great when it comes to audits. Obviously, audits are conducted by their compliance audits civilly. And our informal conferences are held by a hearing office, which is attorneys that work for the department but are separate from the department, and they review the law that applies to it. And the biggest thing to note is this is just if you have a disagreement with the audit, they can review it as a third party. You can also have the right to file a suit in Chancery Court with us. You don't have to go through an informal conference to do that. If you feel like you were done wrong or you don't agree with the way that we dictated the law or that we understand the law, you can take it to court. We do have several taxpayers that do that, and you have the right to. We do have a section of Taxpayer Bill of Rights that are on our website that you can review as well to look at your rights. But when it comes to informal conferences, they will review it. Now, please note that when you are issued a NOPA or a Notice of Proposed Assessment, it comes with an interest. And I don't know what interest is right off the top of my head, but I know it's very high. But interest keeps accruing until it's all paid. Most of the time you can get your penalty waived, but there is a statute in law under TCA 67-1803 that states that interest is not waivable regardless. So just keep that in mind when you decide to take this to an informal conference, that the interest will keep accruing on all the assessments that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you will still have to provide books and records if it goes to informal conference. They stay busy all the time, and they try to get through them pretty quickly, though.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead, y'all. Billy, if you want to come back on, I'm going to open up the chat. Y'all can send this panel a question. I think I've opened it. Yes, okay. All right, so chat is open now for you to put your questions in to Thomas, Billy, or I, or Dan.
Very good. Yep, we'll kind of look and see what kind of questions you've got. I did put the current interest rates and
Okay.
for regular interest on overdue taxes, and then also the interest that applies whenever you're in a installment agreement. That's a little bit different, a little higher. Okay.
So first question was from Lisa. How are NOPAs delivered? They are delivered in numerous different ways. They will automatically go to your 10-tap account. Any letter that comes from the department will go to your 10-tap account. But depending on what you've selected as your preferred method of communication, it will be mailed or it can. Most of the time it's mailed, but they can send them in other different ways. This is taxpayers.
All right. Once the sales tax audit is completed and closed, how long do you have to keep those records that were included in that 3-year audit? What do you think about that, Thomas?
I would keep them for another 3 years or so because you got to think that's 3 years plus the current. So you might get audited for 13 or 20, 23, 24, 25, and we're getting into 26. Obviously, we can't touch January's return of 26 until February. We can touch December's in 26, but make sure that you keep things tidy and that you keep them with you. Let's see. Our
Are audits
audits.
performed by entity, FEIN, or tax type?
It depends on what's going on. So we do have a unit that's called the Discovery Unit that works with Homeland Security. They work with TSA. They work with Customs and Border Patrol. We also have a whole unit that works on, we call them single article cases, but deals with registrations and works with our county clerks on registrations for boats, airplanes, motor vehicles, stuff like that. So it could be a tax type, or it could be an entire full-blown audit. And we do have different sections in the audit division from office to field audit. So it just depends.
And Thomas, Missy had an interesting question too with the way people do electronic payments now and Venmo and Facebook Marketplace and all these other things and cash apps and all that. Have you had any challenges in that area trying to get records or obtain that, or anything special that you want to talk about relating to that?
Venmo, we can get 1099K data, which for those of you that don't know what 1099K is, that's your credit card reports. Every credit card processor is required by law to report to the federal government, as well as we have an agreement tied to that. So we also get that information. So yes, we get all your credit card information, your federal tax returns through the IRS. But Facebook Marketplace is different. If you do transactions through Facebook Marketplace, obviously it'll hit your bank account, but make sure that you keep copies of that stuff. Either take a screenshot of it and just keep it with you, or Venmo's the same way. You can log in and look at it, but just make sure you keep copies of it. Do you have POA get a copy?
I think Beth's asking there, does your power of attorney get a copy maybe of the NOPA? I would suggest any third party professional that helps you with your business, bookkeeper, accountant, CPA, attorneys, anyone like that, that you can give third party access to your 10-tap account. And if you want, it could be just view only or the ability to file and pay. There's several different levels of third party access, but anybody that you would want to be able to see a copy of your letters, especially like a NOPA, they can gain third-party access to your tax accounts. And you can reach out to us about that, or there's information on our website. We actually have a whole webinar dedicated to third-party access to tax accounts.
The next question is about behavioral health therapy services. I recommend, do we have a new business tax seminar coming up?
We do on the 7th, on January 7th, but there are a lot of services that are not, let's talk about different tax types here just briefly. Business tax. Most businesses are subject to business tax and business licensing, but there are some services that are not. Some behavioral health services are, and some are not. So that would be, just without spending too much time now here, reach out to us on that. Sales tax would not be applicable there unless you're selling
Yeah, unless you're selling stuff.
something, a tangible personal property, and depending on the way your business is set up in terms of F&E tax.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just real quick,
Probably.
Katie, on the business tax side there for behavioral health, you're basically looking at um, people who are licensed as medical professionals through the Tennessee Licensing Board. Typically they're going to be exempt from business tax, but most of your type of businesses are going to set up an LLC or a corporation, being subject to franchise and excise taxes. So that's the quick answer. You also might sell items of tangible personal property subject to sales tax, but that's rare, I would say, in your business there. But again, we'd have to break that down for you. We'd encourage you to email us. We'll give you that contact information here at the end as well, and let us get specific with you on those.
And make sure that you do, they've changed a bunch, but also we never really talk about it, but your professional license fee as well.
Yes, professional. That's exactly right. Tennessee
we don't.
professional privilege tax, don't you know?
Yep. Oh yeah. Somebody asked about, we talked about nonprofits, that the card or check must match. Does this also apply to ag and other exemptions? And are cash payments acceptable for these as well? Yes, they must match for ag as well. Yes, you can accept cash payments. The biggest thing that I would hesitate and caution you on is, especially a retailer. We see this a lot with restaurants. Say, for example, you get a youth group that comes in and you want, they come into Chick-fil-A because everybody loves Chick-fil-A. You cannot go up and give a resale certificate to the lady at Chick-fil-A and let all your kids order separately. That is a big no-no. So if you want to buy all of your kids' foods on that resale or on that exemption, then you can. But it must be with a church check, cash, or credit card. So let's see what happens.
I just put a link out there in chat for the PDF in case you didn't scan the QR code when we started there too. Also, we'll have a recording of this webinar on our website either later today or perhaps tomorrow. Okay, so you'll have a link to that. And all of our webinars are on our website, all the ones that we have in our library. Katie will tell you about that as well later on. We've got them for years, so you're welcome to go back and look at them.
What if I don't have records for 2014 or 2015? Those are currently out of the statute period. As long as somebody doesn't come in and do an audit and find, fraud, you should be in the clear, but I'd try to piecemeal what you can together. How long do you keep state tax returns? The physical returns themselves, you don't necessarily have to keep because we have all of those. But if you'd like to keep them, you can. What is the interest rate when the state owes a taxpayer money? Good question. I'd have to look that one up, Kelly. I don't remember off the top of my head because it goes case by case. Our firm charged accounting systems for those years and did not transfer over. So we have a question about changing accounting systems. The biggest thing when you change systems, make sure you get a backup. You should always be able to get a backup when you change over systems. So I highly recommend that you get a backup because we do run into where they don't transfer over because the programs don't read each other. Now we do work with QuickBooks. We have agreements with them. We have agreements with uh, what are what are some of the other ones that we QuickBooks, GP, payables, different things like that. We have those systems, and we do have, if you are under audit, we do have a group called the Electronic Data Group that deals with heavy, large volumes of records. So no number of records is too big or too small for us to handle. So we do have the systems and capabilities to handle all that. Regarding exemptions.
I see a question here from Dennis. What's the best way for a new, very small sole proprietor, any business really, service business, to make sure all forms and taxes are done properly? I'm going to put a push in again. We offer this quarterly new business workshop. We've got one coming up on January 7th. I have a slide later on with more information about that. But if you're a new business, I recommend attending one of these. It's 3 hours long, so I know that's a lot of time. We also will record it, and it'll be available to view it on our website, but it gives a really good overview of what's required. And then we are here, our call center staff, the staff that answers the emails, if you email revenue.support@tn.gov, are trained to help you understand all this, because I understand very well. Before I worked for Department of Revenue, I had a small business. It's very confusing, and where to go for what. There's the Tennessee Department of Revenue, there's the IRS, there's the Tennessee Department of Labor, Commerce and Insurance, if you need a license, all the county clerks, the city officials. There's so much, and this new business workshop that we offer will help break all that down and have it make a little bit more sense to you. And yes, so making sure it's all done properly. Dennis, I applaud you for that effort, for wanting to have that as a goal, and we'll do everything in our power to help you make that, because I know some of this stuff, even that we're talking about today, if you're brand new, some of this might just be like, what in the world are they even talking about? So kudos for attending and wanting to do the best by your business to make sure things are done properly.
We got a question about logistics companies with packing, assembling, fulfillment services. I recommend that you, excuse me, go out on our website and look that stuff up, or you can submit a Zendesk ticket and ask your questions specifically. Remember, those are case-by-case bases. When you get into logistics companies, you start dabbling into interstate commerce, which is a totally different field, and they have different exemptions, different things like that. So I really hesitate to truly answer that question based on the facts that are in the chat, but there are resale certificates that you can use to buy packing material, and there's a lot of stipulations that go with it. Like we say in audit, we love to play 20 questions, so there's about 12 questions you'd have to ask to really answer that question. So I highly recommend that you submit a Zendesk ticket or go out and look on our website for that.
Vanessa has a good question here. I just realized my accountant put the wrong years on my F&E exemption form that I turned in April 24, basically resulting in not filing of the, I don't know if return or the exemption. Basically, accountant error took place, and that's a good example of, you want to go ahead and fix it now. For sure, get whatever filed, but then if you want to go to apply for petition for a penalty waiver, that is a reason that we do often see. One of the questions when you're petitioning for a penalty waiver will say, why are you, what happened? Why are you asking for this penalty waiver? And if you explain the situation in as much detail as possible, that it was an error on behalf of your accountant, probably a good reason for
yeah.
audit to approve that penalty waiver, right? Of
Yeah.
course, like Thomas was saying, we can't, even if it was a mistake on behalf of your accountant or whatever, interest still cannot be waived, but you could get a penalty or waived. And then your next question with that was, is that going to trigger an audit because of that mistake? I don't think there's any way to really, unless there's flat out fraud, at hand, like triggering an audit. I don't even, that
So
just missing more
some
terms of
people get confused and think, oh, that's going to trigger an audit.
it.
Tennessee does compliance audits. We do not do trigger audits like the IRS does. We don't have a flagging system. We do look at data. We do look at analytics to get the best available data and information out there, and we do look at trends. So, but we do not have a trigger system that automatically pings you for an audit. And we only audit probably, I think we looked the other day, we only touch about 2.5% of all taxpayers in Tennessee right now. So very little. Beth had a good question about getting access as a CPA or as a POA. The biggest thing is make sure that your client fills out the paperwork correctly online to give you access, because we can't just grant you access. We have to have a power of attorney form before we can even speak to you about your taxpayer's account. You can call with their social security number and say, this is who I am and I have their social. We still can't talk to you. So we highly recommend you get with your client. Make sure you have all your proper channels set up properly.
Yeah, Maddie had a question. Do credit balances get applied to balances due, or do you have to claim a refund and remit it? No, your credit will go against that. If you have a credit on a particular account that you want moved to another account, say sales tax to business tax as an example, give us a call or send us an email and tell us what you want us to do, and we'll take care of it for you. No, we don't want you to have to go through that whole refunding process. We're most happy to have your credits balance out against each other.
So what you're
That's
saying,
no
Billy, if you've
problem.
got a credit on your F&E account, it's going to get applied to F&E liability. If you've got a credit on that F&E tax account, it won't get applied over to your sales tax liability or your business unless you request it,
That's
unless
exactly
you put
right.
the request in. Okay.
Right. And we have to be careful about the way we do that, because we want to make sure that money goes properly from one to the other. So it's a little intricate. So we have a staff of people that are trained to do that kind of thing.
Make sure that I'm
This
unmuted.
this makes me laugh. So, someone has a question that just says, "Will I get audited?" Billy, do you have your crystal ball handy?
Well, even though Thomas mentioned a fairly low audit selection rate, um, you don't know. You never know. But the thing is, when you are audited, let's say you are, what you want to do is to frustrate people like Thomas and his bunch and say, here's all my records. This is why I did what I did. And this is it. You tell me what I did wrong. Okay. And if Thomas and his crew cannot do that, congratulations, you win. And that's fine. I think a lot of times people don't understand from the state's perspective what our job is. What our job is to, number one, be helpful to you, and to make sure that you know the law, and to make sure you know how to comply with the law, and to only assess tax, penalty, and interest that the laws require. We don't want you to pay extra money. We're not in the business of creating money for the state. That's not what we do. We're in the compliance business, which means we're also in the information business. So please understand that that's where we're going with all this. That's why we have informational webinars. That's why we do new business workshops 4 times a year. That's why we have dozens of people in a call center that answer your calls all day long, and actually do answer it, by the way. Weird, right? We actually do. And my email folks are fantastic, generally getting back to you within an hour or two with your question. So there you go. That's what we do. And we hope that that's beneficial to you.
There's a lot of good questions. Somebody asked about use tax. So real quick, we'll get off topic and talk about use tax real quick. But Bob, you asked questions about ice cream and giving things away. Please note that if you give items away, either it's a donation or you use it from your inventory, you must claim use tax on that, which is line 2, I think now. They just changed the return again.
On the sales tax return,
Yeah,
right?
but it's either line 2 or line 3. They always flip those two around. But it will state items used out of inventory that you did not pay sales tax on, or items that you purchased, which we don't really see anymore because of the Nexus ruling. But make sure that if you give things away, you are required to pay use tax on that, which is the same as sales tax. So I think
It's
we have.
actually, Thomas, the answer to your question is actually you were right on line 2 and 3. Line 2 is cost of personal property purchased on a resale certificate but used. That's use tax. And then also imported into Tennessee use taxes on 3. So you were right on both accounts, actually. So there you go. A lot of people don't understand use tax. That's okay. We're not here for use tax today, but just understand that use tax started in 1947 on the very same day that sales tax started in this state. So it's been around for a long time. It's nothing new. There you go. Wow, you guys are asking a lot of really good questions today.
Yeah,
It's
good
fantastic.
questions. A couple questions about how to reach out to us I'm seeing, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on this since we're getting near to the end anyways. How to reach out to us. Some specifically, I think, Diana, how do you submit a ticket? When we say ticket, basically when you email us at revenue.support@tn.gov, that's what we call a support ticket on our end. You can also do so by going to Revenue Help on our website and clicking on submit a ticket. They get funneled to the same group. It's basically a way to get an answer in writing. Not all of us have are able to be on to get on the phone to actually call. If you've got a job that where you're not able to do that, you can email us at that revenue.support@tn.gov or call us. Unless it's a tax due date, you should be able to reach somebody really quickly on the phone, 615-253-0600. The hours there for both getting a reply via email or getting someone on the phone, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 Central Time.
So just real quick, we did talk about audits, and then I jumped off. But audits can be scary, but we try to make them as seamless as possible. Just remember that if you are audited, you will learn a lot of information. We will learn a lot of information about your business, and you will always have a lifetime contact with the department. You don't necessarily have to call that the 615-253-0600 number. You can always call your auditor once you are done with an audit. I audited a lady about 10 years ago, and she still calls me to this day asking me questions.
So it's a perk to getting audited.
It is a perk. I mean,
Okay.
and you're not necessarily always going to have an assessment. Like I always used to explain that there's 3 ways it can go. You get a refund, you get a no tax due, or you get
Penalized.
you have an assessment. So just
Claudio has a good question. Do we have out-of-state audits? We do.
Yes.
Yes.
We have locations. We cover the entire United States. For auditors, we have auditors anywhere from our New York field office to Chicago, Houston, Newport Beach, California, Chicago, Atlanta, Tampa, Columbia, Philadelphia, and Columbus, South Carolina. Are you hiring? Yes, we are hiring.
Usually.
They are posting our next round of jobs. It will be around the 15th of January. You can follow our Facebook page and our Instagram, and our HR team normally posts those all the way out there.
Yeah, following us on any of these avenues here is a good idea if you are looking for job opportunities with revenue. And I can
You can just go to tn.gov. There's a careers link that you can always look for all kinds of state jobs. And then when they post, they'll show up there. You can submit an application, save your application for that job or any other job that you put in the future as well.
Yeah.
We need some good folks, so that would be great. if you're interested in that.
We've got field audit jobs and out of state coming available too. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I think we've hit all the questions.
Most, if
Well,
not
as
all.
much as we
Most
could.
of the
That's
questions.
for
Best we
sure.
could.
There were
Now,
some specific ones where you may want to email us if it was a very
Yeah.
specific question. We usually won't answer those live on here. And again, we do have a webinar video library. This recording, someone asked about that, if they can reference it later. We will have it posted to our website probably tomorrow. We have to go through some extra steps now to get these videos posted, but definitely by tomorrow, you can go to our webinar video library. You can get to that by going to tn.gov/revenue and clicking on taxpayer education and outreach. Tax webinars, that's where you went to register for today's webinar. New business workshops, you'll click on that if you want to register for our new business workshop. But in the webinar, in the tax webinars, on that page is where you'll also see that library of all of our recordings. We have a couple of cool ones coming up. We actually have a series of the next 3 months, January, February, and March, will be specific to the franchise and excise tax on January 27th, consolidated net worth election. February 24th, family-owned non-corporate entity or fonts. And then, like I said, next week, we've got a quarterly new business workshop. So I want to thank you all. Yes.
Katie, talk about the CPE credits.
Okay.
Again, we're getting several people talking about that, and I know that you are quite busy after this because sometimes people don't click on the little links and do the things right. Would you talk about that?
Right. Yeah. So as you're exiting, there's a quick survey. One question just says, do you have any feedback for us? We love that and welcome that. Ideas for other topics for us to talk about. But also, if you do need CPE credit, I believe it's question 4. You answer yes to question 4 if you need CPE credit, and just make sure the next question, if you need CPE credit, says how do you want your name listed on your certificate. I need you to do that. And to answer your question, I know it's the end of the calendar year, and a lot of the tax professionals are going to have questions about CPE. I am working today and tomorrow, so I'm the one that issues out the certificate. So yes, you will. If you answer yes to that, you will get your CPE certificate before we leave for the New Year holiday.
Okay, well, maybe you don't get a holiday, Katie. Maybe you just need to
Maybe
work on
not.
the certificates. What do you
Okay,
think?
I don't think so. How about
Well,
you?
you have a bad manager. It's your problem.
Katie, if
That's
they
me.
watch a webinar in the library, an old one that we've recorded, how do they request credit for that?
There's actually a little, I'll just show you real quick. Hold on, because we've got another minute. Share web browser. Let's see here. I'm going to go over to tn.gov/revenue. Scroll down to taxpayer education and outreach, and then click on tax webinars. Around the middle of the page, continuing professional education, CPE hours. After you watch a video, you can complete a form. There's a link to the form right here. You just complete that and I get that request. I will say if those are coming through at the end of my day tomorrow, yeah, I wouldn't wait till the very end of the day tomorrow because I'm on Eastern time. So if you're a
And
CPE,
you'll be asked a question or two about the material, so make sure you're going through the
yeah.
webinar.
There's an actual, the form includes you have to answer some questions about the whatever video you watch. So yeah, if you do plan on doing that to get some of your CPE hours in, we welcome you to do that and hope that you can gain a lot from our webinars. But definitely, I would say work on doing those today because a lot of those requests coming in tomorrow, I'll get to them as fast as I can until I gotta go do New Year's Eve. So anyways, thank you all. Thomas, all that information, fantastic. You're a great subject matter expert for us. And
Yeah,
Happy New Year to
we
you
want to
all.
thank all of you for joining us. It's always great to be with you. We had a great 2025 and look forward to an excellent 2026 as well. So reach out on any unanswered questions, please.
All right. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.